What if I told you the endless wars in the Middle East were not only about religion or oil or ancient hatred, but something much bigger hidden beneath all of it? Because some say peace keeps failing for a reason. What you're about to see may change how you understand modern history, secret borders, foreign interventions, proxy wars, and hidden power struggles most people never connect. But the deeper we go, the darker it gets. Because this isn't just about one region. This affects energy, global security, world powers, possibly the future of peace itself. And by the end, you may ask, was lasting peace ever truly allowed? In this documentary, we'll uncover how empires drew the map, how oil changed everything, why foreign powers kept intervening, and the hidden force some believe keeps the region trapped in conflict. And stay until the end, because the final twist may overturn everything you thought caused these wars. Title: Why the Middle East Never Finds Peace. The Middle East's modern struggles are the culmination of millennia of conflict. Its story began because geography made it priceless, a crossroads of three continents where empires rose and fell. Babylon, Persia, Rome, all fought to dominate it. And with every empire came a lesson etched into the land: control was temporary. Amidst this cycle, Jerusalem became sacred to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And what humans call sacred, they often fight hardest to possess. For 400 years, the Ottoman Empire imposed a rough, overarching order. But after centuries of decline, it collapsed under the weight of World War I, leaving a power vacuum that would change modern history. In a secret agreement, Sykes-Picot, Britain and France carved up the region, drawing straight lines through ancient tribes and religious sects. New countries, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, were born from the ink of colonial pens. Another seed of conflict was the 1917 Balfour Declaration, where Britain supported a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. It made two incompatible promises in a land already inhabited, setting two national movements on a collision course. Then came oil. Suddenly, the region was more than holy, more than a crossroads. It was strategic fuel for the industrial world. The game was no longer just about peace, it was about control. In 1948, the British Mandate ended and the State of Israel was born. A dream fulfilled for the Jewish people, a catastrophe, or Nakba, for many Palestinians. War immediately erupted, the first of many that would redraw the map and deepen the wounds. As the world split in two, Washington and Moscow turned the Middle East into a critical chessboard in their Cold War. Local conflicts were magnified into global confrontations. Then, 1979, the Iranian Revolution overthrew a Western-backed monarchy and established an Islamic theocracy. This seismic shift created the region's new Cold War: revolutionary, Shia-led Iran versus monarchist, Sunni-led Saudi Arabia. A new struggle for the soul of the Middle East began. The 20th century closed on a region scarred by the brutal Iran-Iraq War. For 8 years, two nations bled each other white. When the guns fell silent, there was no winner. Only a dangerous lesson: war had become normalized. That fault line ruptured in 1990 when Iraq invaded Kuwait, and again in 2003. Each intervention taught a hard lesson: toppling a regime is easier than building a state. Power vacuums returned with a vengeance, creating fertile ground for extremism. Where governance weakens, radicals enter to fill the void. Then, in 2011, The Arab Spring offered a moment of extraordinary hope. But in Syria, Libya, and Yemen, revolution quickly became civil war, fueled by regional rivals in brutal proxy conflicts. Exploiting the chaos, ISIS emerged, a monster born from broken states. Its caliphate was eventually destroyed, but the ideology and the conditions that allowed it to flourish remain. So many peace agreements have failed because peace is not paper, it is trust. And in a region scarred by generations of conflict, trust may be the rarest and most precious resource of all. Trauma is inherited. It passes down through generations, not in the blood, but in the stories told and the silences kept. It's a ghost in the room, an unseen weight on the shoulders of the young. Children can grow up carrying wounds they never experienced directly. They absorb the anxieties of their parents, the sorrows of their grandparents. They learn the geography of loss before they learn the geography of the world. And historical memory, when untended by reconciliation, can sustain conflict long after the original battle's end. Grievances become heirlooms. The past is not a foreign country. It is a constant pressing neighbor, demanding allegiance and sometimes revenge. Every new dispute is layered over the deep foundations of old ones, making compromise feel like a betrayal of history itself. Many say religion causes the violence. It's an easy answer, a simple villain for a complex story. The passion, the certainty, the call to something higher than oneself. It seems to explain the ferocity of the fighting. But often, political struggles simply wear religious language. Faith becomes a uniform, a banner under which to march for goals that are deeply terrestrial. Land, resources, sovereignty, and control. Power can hide inside faith. It can use the language of God to justify the actions of men, wrapping political ambition in a cloak of divine will. And misunderstanding that, mistaking the costume for the actor, can hide the real drivers of conflict, making solutions impossible because we are trying to solve the wrong problem. Wars persist when weapons flow. A conflict cannot be fought without the tools of war. And in the modern world, those tools are a global commodity, shipped across oceans and borders with chilling efficiency. Conflict can become an economy. For arms manufacturers, for shipping companies, for mercenaries, for smugglers. War is not a crisis, it is a business model. And peace can threaten profitable systems. A ceasefire can send stock prices tumbling. A lasting treaty can render entire industries obsolete. This creates a powerful, often invisible lobby against resolution. That is rarely discussed. The focus remains on the fighters, not the financiers, on the hatreds, not the hardware. Future wars may not be over ideology. The 21st century may be defined by a much older, more primal struggle. But water, food, climate stress. When the wells run dry and the fields turn to dust, borders and flags become less important than survival. Desperation is a powerful catalyst for conflict, and those pressures are already rising. This isn't a distant forecast. It is the lived reality for millions, a slow-motion crisis that is steadily eroding the foundations of stability. Here's the twist. After all this, after the images of violence and the litany of intractable problems, a different perspective emerges. Maybe the Middle East is not uniquely violent. Maybe its history is not an exception, but a reflection of a universal human story of conflict and struggle. Maybe it is uniquely scrutinized, a stage upon which the world projects its anxieties, its interests, and its historical dramas. Europe had devastating religious wars, world wars, genocide. The 20th century, on paper, was far more brutal in Europe and Asia than in the Middle East. Others found paths to peace, not because they were morally superior, but because the alternative was annihilation. They chose integration over isolation, shared prosperity over endless rivalry. Could the Middle East too? That question changes the narrative. It reframes the story from one of inevitable destiny to one of human choice. There were moments, real ones, glimmers of a different future when the wall of hostility seemed to crack. Camp David, treaties, normalization efforts, local coexistence. These weren't just diplomatic photo ops. They were hard-won, fragile breakthroughs. Peace has appeared, briefly, like a desert bloom after a rare rain. That matters. It matters immensely, because it means peace is not impossible, only fragile. It proves that the cycle can be broken, that old enemies can, under the right circumstances, choose a different path. A younger generation is emerging, less shaped by old ideologies, more connected, more restless. They have grown up in the shadow of these conflicts, but also in the light of a globally connected world. Could they rewrite the story? Could their desire for jobs, for opportunity, for a normal life, finally outweigh the pull of the past? Perhaps history is not finished. Perhaps the most important chapters have yet to be written. Maybe peace is blocked by 5 forces: fear, power struggles, external interference, historical trauma, and distrust. Each block reinforces the others, creating a structure that seems permanent, immovable. Remove none of these, and peace struggles. It remains a distant dream, a topic for academics and idealists. Remove some, and possibilities emerge. A crack of light appears. A space opens up for new thinking, for new leaders, for a different kind of conversation. Real peace would demand more than treaties. A signature on a piece of paper cannot heal a century of wounds. It would require security, so people feel safe in their homes. Justice, to address the grievances of the past. Economic dignity, so a young person has more to gain from peace than from war. Regional compromise, and hard truths, spoken and heard. Not easy, but perhaps necessary. Perhaps the only path that hasn't been tried with enough conviction. Because what happens here shapes everyone. Energy, trade, religion, migration, security, history. These are not local issues. They are global currents that flow from this ancient land. The Middle East is not a side story. It is not a problem to be contained. It is part of the world's story, and perhaps, in its struggles and its hopes, it has always been. Maybe the question was wrong. Maybe it isn't. Why the Middle East never finds peace? Maybe it is. Why peace has repeatedly been interrupted? Because those are not the same thing. One assumes failure, the other leaves room for hope. And history can still surprise us. Beyond open war runs a quieter current. Assassinations in hotel corridors, cyber intrusions at 3 a.m. Deniable militias, switching flags, pipelines and ports sabotaged in the dark. Iran's influence was not built by tanks, but by networks. Advisors, Airlifts, credit lines, comms, links, religious ties, commercial ties, security ties. The Quds Force stitched partners from Beirut to Basra to Sana'a. Hezbollah, Iraqi factions, Syrian auxiliaries, Houthi units creating leverage and deterrence. To some, a shield against isolation. To others, expansion by other means. Missiles, drones, proxies raise the cost of striking Iran directly. Across the Gulf, Saudi Arabia counters. Money, media, diplomacy, arms, rallying coalitions, backing rivals to Tehran's allies, shaping battlefields from Lebanon, Yemen, Iraq, Bahrain. The rivalry doesn't stay in one theatre, it echoes across them all. Zoom to the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow blue hinge mines fast boats, missiles, or a single seized tanker. Escorts, radars, satellites watch every wake, insurance spikes, markets flinch. Global stakes sit on a choke point measured in miles. Oil is leverage, spare capacity signals, prices twitch. Balance sheets far away feel it. The petrodollar, crude priced in dollars, surpluses recycled into US assets. Alternatives, UN trades barter crypto, test the edges, but inertia is powerful. On the board, alliances pulse, US Gulf-Israel convergence, Iranian-led axis, Turkey, Qatar, UAE, Russia, China. In cyberspace, malware leaps borders, Stuxnet Shamoon, reminding that refineries and grids are now battlefields too. Maps throb like circuits. Oil fields become chess pieces. Terminals morph into tickers. The shadow war keeps the fire low, but never out. And every deterrent built today can become a grievance tomorrow, unless the logic of networks is bent toward coexistence rather than reprisal. Runways scored into sand, rotors cough awake, drones lift, orbits begin, radars comb horizons, satellites draw invisible grids, foreign bases promise deterrence, tripwires, reassurance, response time. But tripwires can become tethers, protection shades into dependency, sovereignty into lease terms. Patrols calm the map and stir the memory. Open a cabinet. Stamps, classified, cables, code names, cutouts, 1953 flickers, streets of Tehran. A government toppled, oil and fear braided into the plot, a warning that never stops echoing. Covert hands place pieces. Decades later, the board still shakes. Every secret alignment writes a future grievance in invisible ink. When superpowers back strongmen, order hardens like plaster, fast, smooth, brittle. For a season, trains run, flags wave, rebels hide. Then the cracks spread. Prisons teach new loyalties. Exiles collect passports. Exiles collect patience. One funeral, one price hike, one spark. The plaster explodes. Identity is drafted into service. Sect becomes slogan. History a weapon. Lines drawn by faith or tribe. Payrolls, patronage. Communities split along fault lines mapped by those who profit from the fracture. Once identity is militarized, it outlives the war that armed it. Another front opens on the screen. Newsrooms, backchannels, botnets, hashtags as skirmishes, leaks, deepfakes, viral cuts, state media, influencers for hire. Narratives supply morale like fuel supplies fronts. If you can't hold ground, hold the story. If you can't erase the fact, drown it in 50 versions. Airbases guard the sky. Archives haunt the past. Timelines fight over the present. Deterrence or dependency, order or backlash, belonging or blame. The region learns and unlearns the same lessons again and again, until memory chooses to keep the warning, not the wound. Ceasefires arrive like low tide, revealing wreckage, not rest. In Gaza, alarms teach the calendar. Escalation, pause, escalation. Children count by sirens. Parents measure nights by WhatsApp, check-ins, empty cribs, rocket trails right over roofs. Conference rooms print their answers in PDFs. Drones trace circles, pens trace clauses between them. Trauma sets like concrete. Hard, quick, hard to unlearn. Cut north. Lebanon holds a mirror at an angle. A coastline of light, mountains folding into cloud. Beauty that survived a civil war remembers its own cracks. Balconies reflower after each blast. Generators hum like stubborn prayers. The skyline rehearses resilience, the street remembers fracture. A country living on the edge of a page. Margin notes in 3 languages, still insisting on a song. Syria turned from square to siege to sphere. Civil, regional, global flags inside flags. Airspace shared by rivals, agreements written in contrails. A city liberated a suburb, leveled a convoy stalled by a stamp. Camps swell like unscheduled towns. Maps update hourly, grief keeps its own time. The archive grows heavier than the front line. And Yemen, vast, intricate, undercovered. Mountains hold villages like quiet secrets. Ports choke. Aid corridors breathe in dust. Hunger redraws childhoods. A wedding becomes a headline, then a footnote. Truces flicker, blockades harden, skies buzz with aircraft no one below voted for. The catastrophe is immense. The camera battery dies early. If stories are fuel, grief is the exhaust. When facts are jammed, suffering goes offline. Yet even here, hands pass water nurses, step between blasts. Neighbors pull neighbors from grey rooms. The region inhales, waits, exhales. Another pause, another promise. What would it take for a ceasefire to last as long as a childhood? For memory to keep the warning, not the wound. The horizon doesn't move, but we can. Power redraws its playbook. Ankara leans forward, no longer the bridge, the broker. Blue homeland maps ink the seas. Bases extend, deals layer, a new chorus of drones hums across the steppe and coast. Precision from above, policy from below. Influence now exportable. Moscow returns like a tide that remembers every inlet. Jets carve signatures over the Mediterranean. Advisors, contractors, cargo planes, logistics as language. Tartus lights up at dusk, cameras catch handshakes, not the quiet logistics that make them possible. Beijing arrives along rails and fiber. Ports become verbs. Corridors thread deserts and mountains, turning geography into balance sheets. Loans speak softly but bind with time. Cranes write futures on skylines built to move other people's goods. Meanwhile, war learns new math. Swarms outpace pilots. Algorithms rank targets before humans finish the sentence. Jam the spectrum, blind the eye. The battlefield spreads to servers and satellites, outages are strikes and silence is a weapon. And under it all, the hush of nuclear fear. Ambiguity as doctrine. Thresholds guarded by red phones and rooms without cameras. Some decisions are measured in minutes, others in megatons, both in hush. Who profits when the map stays nervous? Arms lines thicken. Insurance premiums climb. Futures markets pulse on rumors. Barrels rise on smoke. Reconstruction is penciled in before the rubble cools. Sanctions close doors. Middlemen find windows. Shells of companies house rivers of money. Gold changes hands. Data changes owners. Instability becomes an index. Risk is securitized. Tragedy is commodified. The longer the stalemate, the richer the contracts. A system where war is bad business, just not for everyone. So the question returns like a warning flare. If the incentives reward the fire, who will pay to keep the water flowing? In the end, the hardest revolution may be this, changing what wins when no one's looking. The machine hums, gears of policy, Gears of profits, gears of proxies. Some chaos isn't a storm, it's a structure. Budgets renew it, bureaucracies align to it, headlines feed it. A cycle so smooth it feels like gravity. But history hides quieter rooms. A tent by the wadi where elders barter mercy. A market where dialects mix. Prices, not flags, keep the peace. Hands rebuild a roof before the ink on treaties dries. Mothers run kitchens that end disputes. Imams and priests share tea. Ordinary coexistence holds when states fall short. Another current shifts beneath, oil receding from the center. Rigs fade at dusk. Dawn wakes solar fields across the dust. Grids smarten. Deserts bloom with panels. Ports prepare for cables and green cargo. If energy changes, incentives might too. Different winners, softer maps. A generation arrives with code, canvas, courage, murals over blast walls, startups in borrowed rooms, classrooms lit late, music scenes, maker labs, cheap satellites, new languages of belonging. Maybe peace isn't missing, just unfinished, a work in progress, constantly edited by those who show up. If structures can reproduce conflict, they can be rebuilt to reproduce care. The sun lifts, stone and steel, script and circuit, an old world and a new one, sharing the same light. Empires tried conquest, ideologies promised salvation, wars claimed solutions. Yet perhaps peace begins somewhere simpler, when memory stops demanding revenge and starts imagining coexistence. That may be the hardest revolution of all. If this documentary changed how you see the Middle East, subscribe to Dark History File. Because history is never just past. It explains the world unfolding now. Comment below. Do you think lasting peace in the Middle East is possible? And if you want the next deep documentary on hidden geopolitical history, watch the next video on screen now. Until next time, keep questioning the stories behind the headlines.